everybody. Welcome to the Route Consultant Weekly webinar focused on the bread industry. If you haven't been here before, my name is Josh Gregory. I'm the Vice President of Education here at Route Consultant. And all I'm here for is to just help be a background and help provide these opportunities for you and hopefully help explain them, help you understand them as you're getting into the space for the first time. Now, just a reminder for the format of today, if you are here live, we are going to have a Q&A at the end. So anything we talk about today or anything that you may have questions at all on this bread industry, feel free to put those in the Q&A button at the bottom of this window, and we will answer those at the end of today. If you put it in that chat button at the bottom, I'll miss it. So make sure that if you have any questions, that you put it in the Q&A so that we can actually get to them and address them. Now, we've had a few of these now, so if you've missed any of them, they are all on our YouTube page. You can go in and watch them. But importantly, today we're going to be talking about, something that if you've been in any kind of logistics industry, you'll understand is important. And one of the most crucial parts to actually operating, which is understanding the trucks that you need to be successful, any other equipment that you need to use, and how you keep those trucks moving and operational in your business. So today we have brought Stephen back on to kind of talk through that side of the business, what he's seen, pros and cons, different things to think through there when you're thinking about vehicles for the bread space. So Stephen, if you want to go ahead and jump on, I will kick it over to you and let you get started. Hey, Stephen.
Hey, Josh. Hey, good to be back with you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, like you said, yeah, trucks are really important if you want to operate in the bread space. And there are lots of considerations, but you will find, like you said, if you've been in the logistics business, that this is going to be a lot easier to operate than most of your trucking companies. So you're going to have a lot of freedom and flexibility to really see, what works best for you. And so I'll kind of run through some of those pros and cons, but really the best starting point is when you're evaluating a business, start with the current operator, see what he's doing, see how he's operating, and then use that entrepreneurial skill that you have to see how you can make that better. And so as you're evaluating, think about, loading the truck, unloading the truck. Operationally, are you pulling out of a large depot that has 48-inch docks? Are you pulling out of a storage unit or an out parcel? And so those are kind of the starting points to figure out how you want to operate. Are you looking to utilize that vehicle for something else down the road? Or are you really just looking for something that you can get from point A to point B? And then digging into the actual route, what types of products are you going to be selling? If it's bread, those comes in bread trays. You're going to have to return those at the end of the day. And so thinking through space requirements, and then also where you live geographically. So a step van is going to be a little bit colder in the wintertime if you are, in Michigan than in Florida. And so you don't have that separation between the box and the cab, where if you're working in the cab, like you would in like a box truck. So starting with those, you can really get a good baseline for how you want to operate. And there's really just three different ways that I have seen people operate. And most common, that's going to be a 16 to a 26-foot box truck. These are great, well, first for separation from the cab. So if you have afternoon paperwork that you have to do, your own phone calls, you can keep the cab climate controlled, separated from the box. There's a point of separation there. Now, downside, of course, you're going to have to walk around to the back of the truck if you want to get to the cargo. And if you're not operating off of a lift gate, you're going to have to step up into that truck. With a larger 26-foot truck, that could be quite high. I really like lift gates. If you're going to operate these businesses, you can move a lot of volume. You can utilize them for different businesses. If you have a lift gate, some guys don't like them. I would lean toward more of a railgate style. The tuck unders, when they hit the ground, they tend to have a little bit of a slope to them. And the bread trays, when they're on rollers, they want to fall off. And so I'm a big fan of the railgates, especially if you're servicing restaurants, you're moving lots of buns. It's a lot more efficient, in my opinion. I tend to believe bigger is better. So you may have a route that only requires a 16-foot truck, but really, how can you utilize that after hours? Do you want to utilize that in other ways? So if you move toward, a 26-foot truck, still staying under your CDL requirements, you have some availability to operate that, in some different ways when you're not running the route. So box trucks are great starting points. I also see a lot of owner operators running truck and trailer. So if you want to have a pickup truck that tows a 14 to 20-foot trailer, these are really easy to get in and out of. You're no more than 18, 24 inches off the ground. You typically have a a back that can fold down, which you can utilize as a ramp. And then these are great because when you're done, you drop the trailer and you can tow the camper on the weekend. You can utilize this as a personal vehicle, and cross use that in your personal life. So those are great ways to operate, but it makes it a little harder if you're going to be pulling on and off of docks. So you need to really go back to, where you're loading from, where the depot is, and consider that if you're thinking truck and trailer. And then last is step vans. So we see a lot of step vans in the business. These are great for C-store routes, convenience store routes where you're in and out of the truck frequently. You're moving smaller individual single serve merchandise. They're easy to operate in and out of tight spaces, parking lots. But again, the downside there on those is, you don't have a climate controlled separation. So if you're in a really cold climate, know that all day you might be fairly cold in that tin box. But beyond that, I mean, you have a lot of freedom and flexibility if you want to try and sell ad space. I've seen vendors where they've partnered with local beer or liquor distributors, running ad campaigns, and they have, graphics that they can put on the side of their truck and really utilize that for additional revenue. So you get a lot of flexibility if you move the box truck route where you don't necessarily have on a truck and trailer.
Got it. Yeah, and that is very different than those of us who are used to the FedEx or Amazon space, where there are very specific types of vehicles you can use, and they also typically have to be branded, or at least cannot be branded with some other random company that you're able to use for ad space. That is very much not a thing FedEx would allow you to do, delivering FedEx boxes while branded with a local business. So I think I think it just kind of highlights the very clear difference here, where with bread, you have a lot of control and a lot of choice over the types of vehicles you can deliver, and what you can do with those vehicles. So a couple of questions before we go into another kind of part of this. When you're thinking about buying vehicles, do you typically see that people will buy new or used, and what's kind of the normal there?
Yeah, kind of the sweet spot, in my opinion, is slightly used, 2 to 3 years old. Unless you're running a high mileage route, most of these routes are going to be pretty low mileage, and you're just going to incur so much loss buying brand new, rolling it off the lot. I don't think that it's worth it based on, your needs. Certainly that could change if you want to utilize it, overnight hauling freight, then absolutely maybe brand new if you're going to have a longer runway with that vehicle.
Yeah. And I think part of that too is, how often do you find that these types of vehicles get into accidents and get damaged from that type of incident?
Yeah, your most common is probably going to be backing into, a corner of something in a parking lot. You're not going to see lots of wrecks. Maybe if you're in a rural route, hitting a deer, that could be a big concern. I've had a driver do that years ago. We were going through a big development area where they were cutting down trees and they were building apartment centers, and it really stirred up the wildlife. So that's a consideration if you're more rural. Major accidents, I haven't seen. Operating smaller vehicles is not as much of a concern.
Yeah, and I'd also point to the hours that, you're typically not on the road for many hours during the hours when everyone else is on the road. Oftentimes you're starting really early, and so you avoid some of that normal kind of congestion that happens during the day. So it's a fact, the factors of it being low mileage, the time of day, and it being smaller vehicles, I think all help avoid, those accidents. So I think all of those are reasons why vehicles can last longer, and why you don't always need, brand new with warranty in this space. And I think that's good for people to hear, because when they're evaluating these, it sounds like that's kind of a standard practice, and you're not often going to see, a bread route with a 2024 truck, because it's just not really needed, or it's not common in this space. Now, this is something too, it probably goes along with your answers previously, but are there any kind of safety technology requirements on any of these vehicles that you see from the bakeries?
No requirements from the bakery. As always, abide by local regulations, wear a seatbelt, don't operate your handheld computer while you're driving. But operationally, there's no requirements from the home office.
Yeah, and that is different too. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you can have whatever safety technology you want on the vehicles, and so you can make those decisions. But there's nothing that comes top down from a bakery that's telling you what to do. Now, you mentioned this a couple of times. I know that there's some really heavy loads that you're often dealing with in some of these spaces that you're trying to get in and out of the trucks. What kind of equipment do you see people usually using to load those heavy pallets into the vehicle and off the vehicle? How do you keep your drivers safe? Is there any training you do, or what are you doing there?
Yeah, not a whole lot here in the bread space. You're going to operate with trays that, I mean, the most you might lift is maybe 18 pounds. So a typical bread tray is 26 by 29 inches. And so those would roll on a dolly. If you're moving cookies and crackers, that could, you could utilize multiple different ways. Um, Hand carts, U-boats, those are great ways to utilize. A lot of the stores even have them available for you. So if you're pulling in, if you're a Pepperidge Farm cookie rep, and you have lots of cardboard boxes, you can use a U-boat from the store to stack and then deliver and then leave it right there.
Got it. And another part of this kind of thought process and equation is, you talked about wanting to use larger trucks. How do you really go about deciding how much volume you need in your vehicle? Deciding how much you're going to need in a given day. Is that something the bakery helps you understand, or is that based on your experience?
Yeah, as you're evaluating businesses, you're going to get weekly sales. We talked about that 52-week sales average, and then your local DM is going to help you in breaking that down onto a weekly basis. So we know that 60% of our sales are going to come from Friday to Sunday, and so we want to make sure that we're heavier on the weekend than we are on a Monday. And so with that said, look at how many trays you're moving a week, look at the order loads, look at the weight. And you'll easily, going back to starting with the distributor that is selling you the route, you can look at his operation. Is he missing some sales because he's outgrown his vehicle? Is he missing some sales because he's ordering, the wrong spread? Each independent will have some guidance from the home office, but the independent nature of this, they can't tell us what to order, when to order it. And so there is some flexibility in there. And a good operator needs to keep that in mind and order accordingly.
Yeah, and I think that plays into the idea that when you're taking over a new route, a new territory, you need to be asking questions of the seller. Otherwise, you're going to have to learn those things on your own after years. Otherwise, it's a lot easier if you can ingest that contextual territory information about volume. And a great question that Stephen mentioned is just, are there ever days where there's more volume than you can fit on your truck? Are there ever days where you're missing sales because your truck isn't large enough? And then the follow-up question is, let's say that there is a bigger truck that could hold it all. Are there any parts of the territory that it would be difficult to drive that truck into? Or, are there any businesses that 26 footer isn't going to fit? And some of that you can learn on your own by driving the area, but if you can get all of that information up front, it'll help you make those vehicle decisions. Now, one of the things too you mentioned when it comes to having extra space is finding other things you can do with it. What are some of the thoughts you have there of, like, if I have extra space in my vehicle, or after hours things that you can do with those vehicles? What are any things you've seen work there?
Yeah, again, this is going to come down to the route. You have to evaluate how early you can get into the warehouse, what you're going to do with your empty trays when you finish the day, if the warehouse is closed and you can't return them. So there's some risk analysis that you have to do there. But like we talked about, this is early morning work. A lot of guys can be done fairly early. And so I've seen, guys utilize their truck for appliance delivery, furniture delivery. That's a great option. Now you're going to need a MC number, a DOT number if you move into that space. So there's some legal requirements that might be different than the bread space. But if you have a truck that's big enough, if you have a lift gate, certainly there are lots of delivery options that you have to utilize that vehicle when it's not running.
Yeah, perfect. And I think, it's the entrepreneur space. With FedEx, there are more restrictions on how you can use those vehicles. There's still ways to do it, but here you can think of it as your vehicle, and there are ways to use it, cross-utilize it, even use it in the FedEx space in certain ways. So lots of things to think about, because the timing of the routes are pretty different than what you see in the typical 9 to 5 industry, that there are different ways that you may be able to use those vehicles in a normal course of a day.
And like we said earlier, there's heavy days and there's slow days. So, every route's going to be different, but there may be in some premium route situations where you may only need that big truck 2 to 3 days out of the week to make deliveries. And then the rest of the week, you can go in a personal vehicle, you can go in a cargo van, to merchandise, to build displays, to service the accounts, to build the relationships with the managers, where you're not necessarily needing that big truck. You still need to service your stores, but there is some availability during the week that you could utilize that.
Yeah, perfect. Now, a quick one. Where do you typically find people store their vehicles when they're not being used?
Yeah, if you're able to store the vehicle at the depot, that's a great option. Typically, you're going to find security cameras and there's going to be lots of vehicles there. And so that's a safe place. Some guys, if you live on territory, if they only get 2 trucks, 3 trucks a week from the bakery, they'll take that truck home. And then you have a really easy commute into your stores. You can park in public supercenter parking lots with approval. You can park in storage units. If you rent a space there, you really have a lot of options.
Okay. Um, kind of the last thing to think through here. When you've used your vehicles, thought about it over the years, how long do you typically try to run those vehicles? Is there a mileage point? Is there a number of years or some kind of cost? Or do you just run until they break down? What kind of things go into that decision?
Yeah, that's a great question. Really, it comes down to cost for me. Mileage, reliability. I don't want drivers broke down on the side of the road. It creates a hassle. It slows their day up. We need to get a U-Haul. We need to transfer the product from one to the other. So reliability matters. So you can find that sweet spot. If it's a 2-year-old vehicle, I think you have a pretty long runway, maybe a 10-year runway where your starters, your alternators, those are the things that probably go out the quickest on a gas vehicle. If you're moving into a bigger 26-foot diesel truck, your maintenance requirements are going to be a little bit higher. You can run those trucks, as you know, to a higher mileage. Just make sure you service them.
Yeah. Well, speaking of servicing, what do you typically find people do? Anything different there, or is it just local mechanics?
Yeah, local mechanics for your smaller trucks, it really comes down to the availability of the space requirements in the mechanic shop. So how high is his door? Can he get a 16-foot box truck in there? So a lot of times if you find a guy that can service an RV, he can service a box truck.
Got it. Yeah. So depending on your vehicle, depending on the composition of your fleet, you might have to make some decisions there. Or might have to find it, more of a specialized mechanic, or, the 26 footers, the diesels, you obviously need the diesel mechanics. That adds its own layer of complexity, making sure you find that. Now the last question here before we open it up for anybody else. Where do you typically find people go to get those used vehicles? Is it usually private transactions, Facebook, Craigslist, or are you going to actual dealers? What do you find most people do?
Yeah, Marketplace is a great resource. Commercial Truck Trader, Truck Paper. Local dealerships, of course, you're going to pay a little bit of a premium for that. These are going to be, fleet turn-ins, your GMC 3500s, your step vans. You can find those readily available at a dealer. The internet's really changed the game when it comes to finding a good used vehicle. You can go. I remember when I started in 2007, I found a steal of a deal on a truck in Texas. And I flew from Tennessee all the way to Texas for that truck and drove it home. So
Yeah.
it's wide open.
Yeah, and it's whatever you can do to get that truck there, it's worth it. You can make that cost analysis pretty easy. A flight to Texas to save a few $1,000s is always worth it. Perfect. So I think what the biggest thing here when you're thinking about vehicles in this industry is that you've got more flexibility than just about anywhere else. Your goal is to fit and make sure you can fit your volume and the most amount of volume you have in that truck on any given day, but understand any kind of territory requirements for that vehicle, anywhere that you might have to navigate that might be a little bit challenging depending on the size of the vehicle, and ask as much of that from a seller if you're taking over that business, so that you're ready for all of that and so that you can make the right fleet and capital decisions early. Now, is there any other equipment in this business that typically comes with these sales, or is it usually just the trucks?
Just the trucks. Most of them are going to come with handheld equipment. So those are barcode scanners. Those are inventory management tools. Zebra is a big popular brand in this space. I'm sure you're familiar with, and a lot of FedEx guys are familiar with as well.
Yeah. Zebra's number one in FedEx as well. So yeah, if you've seen that, it's not going to be the exact same because obviously FedEx has a proprietary software on those scanners, but they do similar things in that they're scanning packages and dropping them off and in the same type of hardware. So that's what we wanted to cover today. I got a couple of quick things. So if there's anybody who has any questions for Stephen about fleet, about understanding this, or about bread as a whole, you can go ahead and put it in the Q&A. Now, there is one new listing this week. This is out of North Carolina, and it is one route at $202,000. This is doing about $6,180 a week. And there are 12 weekly accounts. So if you have any questions about that one or any of our other active bread listings, we have a bunch on the webpage. So if you haven't seen those, it's on routeconsultant.com, and you can look at our bread listings. And anything there that you have questions on, you can either click on that listing and ask for information on it, or just email info@routeconsultant.com, and we'll be there to answer anything you got for us. Now, for everybody else, if you're trying to figure out the best way to learn more about this space, we're going to keep providing this info. We're going to keep being here, Stephen and I, every Wednesday, coming to you with new information every single week. So that's going to be here for you. So you can go ahead and subscribe and sign up, and we're going to be here. And if you ever miss one, it'll be on YouTube. We also have a one-on-one kind of quick overview course hitting a few different things in this space that's up live on our website. So if you haven't done that, that's free. You can sign up for it, jump right in and watch it all right now as soon as we get off this call. After that, we also have a new investor summit coming soon that is a little bit deeper dive and really to help you make that decision if this is the right space for you or not. And that'll be digital. It'll be on demand as soon as we have it up live in the next few weeks. And then more than that, we've also are going to have ways, if you're trying to get into this space, whether it's through a purchase or maybe you have already started in this space looking for help, we're going to have ways for you to partner with Stephen and Route Consultant as you're getting into the space, whether it's evaluating these routes for the first time or figuring out how to operate effectively, coming each week and being able to talk to Stephen. We will have hours where you can get set up with that, ask him questions as a part of our consulting program to help make sure that you understand the space and that you have a way to answer questions that come up every day to help make sure you're a better business operator in this space. So that's all that I'm seeing. I don't see any questions that have come through. So Stephen, thank you so much for your time here today, being a resource and being here for everybody this week. And we will see you here next week, and hopefully we will see all of you as well. So thanks again for joining, and we will see you all next week.